Welcome back to another template design video, and today we're looking at probably the most imitated par 3 in the world, and that's the Redan, based on the hole at North Berwick. In terms of what a Redan is, it's a very one-dimensional hole, but requires a lot of creativity, courage, and indeed a very accurate shot in terms of distance and direction to score well. It's a really good long par 3 template, and we're going to look at exactly how you might use this, as well as spins you might put on it. So what exactly is a Redan, and why is it copied so much? Well, it's based on one hole at North Berwick as mentioned, and it features one very strong slope from right to left is the Redan. You do also see a reverse Redan, which is left to right. I'm not going to devote a different video to it, it's the same concept, just flipped horizontally. And what this is about is to encourage people to use the ground and use this slope to get the ball close to the pin. A Redan is really key for playing away from a pin in order to get close to it. So those of you going on a direct line will run off the green. Some cases you can go direct, but you'd have to stop it very short, and as you can see it's a long hole, plays downhill in this case, and therefore the ball is just going to go and run on. So what this is all about is you picking your spots and working out whereabouts you might want to land it in order to end the ball close. And for every single pin usually on the green you want to use this kicker slope. It's just a question of where on it you find it, whether it's short and it just feeds off the front corner, high up, which is going to take it all the way down to the very back left pin, or you might be skirting it just for that back right in this case. It's meant to be a very difficult hole, but it's a different one-shotter because it's really rewarding creativity rather than your classic par 3 where it's just see where the pin is, aim pretty close. It isn't a subtle hole. It's a subtle hole in that whereabouts you have to hit it. It has to be very precise, and so people might call it unfair because they keep hitting it and go to different places. It's not just you hit this and you end up here. It's whereabouts on there do you hit. But equally, it's not really asking you for a number of ways to play it. In real life you might want to bank a fade into it to have it land slightly shorter, or hit a draw into it to have it run out more. Doesn't work quite so much in game, but there's more subtlety in real life than there is necessarily in game. Now on this version, this plays very faithfully to the North Berwick hole. You've got these two bunkers which partially obscure the view. You can see the slope. This hole is all Joe, by the way, I had no part in this. And then these two bunkers are hidden, and you typically do have a Redan bunker on the inside left of the green. But the key with this hole is whereabouts do you hit the kicker slope. Now for this one, I don't really want to hit this slope too hard or too high and it will go back at the green, too short and too far right, and it's probably hitting this runoff. So we probably actually want to land it just about here. Now the question is whether I want to hit a 6-iron or whether we want to hit a 5-iron and just loft up slightly. I think we'll go that. Got a perfect, slightly wonky swing line, but you'll see even missing that kicker slope, it's still going to run towards the left hand side. You don't necessarily need to hit the kicker slope for this pin. It was very much about visualizing that, and even right at the end you can see the hard turn left that it took. But for different pins you're going to hit the ball somewhere differently on that kicker slope. This one was very much very exacting with where you hit it, and you had to be very precise. But let's look at a couple of different spins on this hole, as well as different Redans and how they might function, because although the concept is the same, exactly how the ball reacts when it hits certain landing spots is always a little bit different. Another great example of the Redans found on the 8th at Raynor Ridge. And here you can see the simplicity of the hole. You've got this one big slope as ever, which you just want to work out how high up the slope do you want to hit in order for the ball to funnel all the way down. We probably want to be quite high up. If the pin's short and here, well, we're landing a little bit short. So once more, it's testing real precision in terms of both distance and direction. It's got that famous Redan bunker, just short left. But also this one is going to test whether you can reach this top point and have the ball run all the way down. It's got a really nice setting. Again, you can see it's kind of a mid-iron that we're testing, and wind's going to complicate this one as well. But it's typically not a hole where you should be trying to go straight at the pin. You'll find it tough to access the pin that way. And it's got one very straightforward slope that you just have to deal with. I think we might have to go 4 iron. Somewhere over there. So we've hit the high part of the slope, and I'm now expecting this to run all the way down to the front left of the green. So again, the point of this hole is really to test a player's vision and creativity. Can they realise that where they've got to land the ball? Okay, that's not perfect, we probably need to be a little bit further left, but you get the general principle of how the hole works. And yeah, the idea of playing away from a pin to access a pin. So the next one we're going to look at is the 4th at NGLA, and we actually have the real course file for this thanks to Beamtown, who sent it over. So this is LiDAR, so this is exactly the slopes that you would see in real life. Therefore, when we're going down the tee, you can see that you basically see the green just appearing up over these little bits of grass. You've got that bunker in front, the Redan bunker, short and left as you would expect. You can see the really big kicker slope, and I would say this is quite possibly the hardest Redan in the world, although don't quote me on that, I'm not the real life expert. But what makes this particularly tricky? We've got this big kicker slope. I'm deliberately not showing you the green yet. You've got this big kicker slope in front, but were you to miss it or be a bit too long, you've got bunkers there, and indeed long. So if you go through it, that's pretty disastrous. You do have to hit that kicker slope, and it's dependent on draw or fade, because when we look at the green, it's really flipping difficult. You've got 4 pins on here in close proximity. You've got this one tucked right the way in here, and in order to get there, you're going to have to really be flirting with the long kind of falls back of the green, and anything too long and straight is just gone. So this is a green that is as tough as they come. Then you've got this tiny front pin which doesn't have much before it starts feeding away from it. You're going to have to land that really far short and using the kicker slope. You've then got 2 tucked just behind the bunker. They're kind of your more standard ones where you're probably landing it, I would say, about here, having it ride that slope and then run down. And then this one, I think you have to be as lucky as you are good, probably. That is a nightmarish pin. But I wanted to use this one as it's a great example of how it works in real life, and that how you do see these contours work. There is like an interesting little spine at the front of the green. You've got a runoff short and left as well. This is the most difficult interpretation of this hole I've seen in game, whether in real life or not. I'm not so certain, but it'll probably be up there. So it's a fairly tricky template to put a twist on because of the very distinctive way in which it plays. One example I've used has been the 18th at Playa Saona. So I wanted to finish on a par 3, and with this one I decided to have kind of a Redan on the front, and I personally quite like using Redans as a way to get around a front hazard. That's kind of how they're designed, but you'll find these sorts of kicker slopes on a lot of holes but not necessarily define the whole green complex. So I wanted to have one where for the front half it basically plays like a Redan, so how close. If you hit on this slope, you're ending up really close to this pin. If you're landing it a little bit shorter, you're ending up basically here. And the back half, because it was already a really long par 3, I decided to make play like a punch bowl, or at least a little bit. So although you've got that front half, the back half, it's basically just hit a long club, hit one of these 2, and it will gently trickle back towards the pin. Is it a great example of a Redan? Absolutely not. It's just a way in which you can use that one concept within a green complex and make it work. It wasn't ever designed to be absolutely a perfect Redan. It was more a way I found of making the front 2 pins play a little bit differently to the back 2. And as ever, when we put a twist on something, is it still doing the same thing as what you want the originals to do? Well, it's a long club. It's where are you picking your landing zone within here. There's a couple of bunkers here that if you miss, you've got a tricky up and down. And then for the back pins, is it still playing like a punch bowl? Well, yeah, it's a long approach. Again, it makes sense. And I would say it's a unique hole, and it was a fun little way to finish. I'd never finished a course on a par 3 before, and this felt like a nice way to do it. So that's one example of how you might put a twist on this one. Those of you who've followed my designs for a while will know we had to finish with this one, mainly because I still think this is the favourite hole I've ever designed. It's the 4th at Kaiuma Bay. It's a drivable par 4 which features the Redan in a bit of a twist form. First of all, it's obviously a par 4, but secondly, you don't necessarily use the kicker to get to every single pin. It's also bunkerless, which was different for me. You still had the Redan bunker kind of featured by a cliffside, and it's a little bit of a hogsback hint as well with how the spine works. Like I say, I genuinely don't think I'll ever top this as a drivable par 4 design. It's one of those wonderful ideas that just worked out perfectly. But we're going to go into this hole a little bit more. So standing back on the tee, and you can see what's laid out in front of you. 330 yards, down to 37 feet, so the elevation is making you think a little bit more. It's probably playing about 320, 321. Your driver carries however far. You've got the Redan slope right here that you've got to carry. You cannot carry unless in a severe tailwind. You can't carry the ball all the way to the green, so you really have to use this slope and bounce it all the way along. Where this one I felt got even more interesting was your options. If first of all, if you went long, the land moved in such a way that it rolls down here and leaves you just about down there, and you then got to pitch back over that to a green that runs away, so it gets trickier and trickier if you short side yourself down there. If you wanted to lay way back anywhere else in the fairway, the fact that it's basically just land movement means you can go pretty much anywhere you want. There's a load of space all the way out here, so you can play up to here and leave yourself a wedge shot, full wedge potentially all the way down the green depending on pin position, and that's a very different angle into the green. You could lay up all the way out here, play pretty close to the cliff and have a shot that would be good, particularly for a back pin. Could use some of the backstops as well on the green too. Because there's also a general trend of the land moving from right to left, you could run the ball down into this area, so you can actually play, I don't know, a 4-iron to this sort of point, and it will generally funnel into that position, which gives you that good look at the green, albeit still playing over the cliff. But most people would tend to drive this, and that's where it got really interesting for me. I thought it's a fun way of making people take on a large amount of danger. You will bring double bogey into play if you go for the green, but also you can make eagle that way. So the next aspect of this that's a bit of a twist is the fact that the Redan sloping, you've got it here, there's a tiny little hint of a spine, so you could use, you'd never hit that if you ran the ball in here, and this is why when I talk about putting twists on a template, you've got to really understand what we're trying to do. I never wanted to impede you. If you landed the ball here, we do want the ball going all the way down there if you hit it with enough force and hit up here enough. So that spine only ever really comes into play if you're pitching into it, and there's a pin down here and you can use that as a backstop. There's then a back tier, which doesn't really play as part of the rest of the green. If you almost think of this as a Redan green with a little tier up here as well. But that does add a different twist as to how you play this one pin up here. And angles wise, you probably want to be coming at it from the left rather than over that little shoulder of the green. So because it's so much fun, let's go and pop the ball in the water, shall we? The little bit of wind coming out of the south makes us think a little bit more. I actually might have to de-loft this just a touch. Slow could help. And in actual fact, with this wind and this driver, bear in mind this was designed in 2019, it's actually carried pretty much all the way to the green. And because it landed a bit higher up, it's actually stayed up on this little shelf, which leaves a decent makeable eagle putt. But as you can see, if you were to hit a red fast there, that's game over and you're making double bogey probably at best. So that's our Redan, or in this case the one we're looking at on Potunk, the reverse Redan, and how you can make it work. It is a really interesting par 3 in that it asks a very different question of hitting to a landing spot and really visualizing rollout, rather than the usual target golf sort of par 3s that we're used to. You can use it really creatively, like so creatively on so many different numbers of holes, and so many par 5s that or long 4s that I've built, you'll find Redan kickers as ways to get around front hazards from different angles. So do try it out, do put spins on it. It's a really fun concept to use, and one that I think really enhances any course. As ever, I hope you've enjoyed, and see you again soon.